our history, and what can be done in the future. We need to pay respect to the land and to the people who coexisted with this land for centuries. And so, I'd just like to say, here in Las Vegas, the UNLV campus sits upon the ancestral land of the Southern Paiute people, and we are doing this to pay respect to the elders of the past, present, and future. And honestly, land acknowledgements are the bare minimum. Acknowledging this piece of our past helps us talk about ongoing issues because they affect our future. And one big issue that I can think of that's a perfect example of that is language revitalization. Our language is incredibly tied to our culture, just like any other language and culture out there. You can ask anybody who's had to learn a new language. You can't learn one without the other. And sadly, because of years and generations of assimilation, our languages are now endangered. And so we need to be doing more to get back our languages. And I'm really happy to say that there has been things that have been done. UNR just recently included a indigenous language major that you can study, and that opens so many doors. It not only helps the issue of language revitalization, it helps with the recruitment and retention of Native students in higher education. They can, with language revitalization, you make Native students feel comfortable and feel safe because it's something that's known, it's something that's familiar, and it makes them want to stay in higher education. According to the Post-Secondary National Policy Institute, college enrollment among Natives has fallen, and higher education participation has dropped from 23% to 19%. And those are very, very sad statistics, and we need to be doing more to change them. We need to get faculty, staff, and students to be culturally competent so that these Native students can focus on their future, so that they can feel comfortable in these institutions of higher education, because their grandparents and even their parents, they weren't allowed to be in these institutes of higher education. In the boarding schools, they only taught trades, and that was where it ended. They taught basic reading and writing, and that was it. Then you learned a trade, and you went into that career, and that was it. And so we need to be doing more to make our Native comfortable on campus and to retain Native students. And as you can see, land acknowledgements are this is why we need them. They're so important. It's a simple sentence that anyone can do, and anyone can say, type, anything, to pay respect and get proactive in the future of Native Americans in this country. And so I would like to thank NCHI Diversity Summit for inviting me to deliver the land acknowledgement and speak on its importance today. Yeah.
The puppeteers string me up.
My elbows jump.
My wrists hang limp in the air. I'm everything they want me to be.
A girl.
A boy.
Look at my black dress.
So handsome in my button-up.
Tights.
Khaki pants.
Purple church shoes with a tiny kitten heel.
Sneakers caked in dirt after sliding at home base. I'm so good at playing the part.
To be girl is to obey. To be soft ceramic tea kettle heavy over wispy blue flames. To be girl is to boil over and evaporate in the same breath. To love and to be loved silently.
To be boy is to get my way. To be a train boring through mountains, tracks paving my manifest destiny. To stand up straight with my hands up first. To be gendered is to answer every question before it is asked.
To ask no questions.
I follow my cues. I say all the right lines.
My body is a hollow instrument carved from broken branches.
Strings wrapped around my lungs, breathing in spite of me.
The puppeteer speaks and my mouth jerks open.
I speak only when I am spoken for. Words coerced but called a gift. Control masked as mimicry.
The shadow of a gender I wish I didn't have to be. It's just so easy to let someone else do the talking.
Obedience is a safer body than mine. His movements are my movements. Run fast.
Walk with back straight.
Legs spread while seated, as if I were just the image in the mirror. And I let it happen. I learned by watching,
Another thread fastening me to womanhood.
mimicking that which I must perform.
I let my body be sculpted into caricature.
Each tug of the strings bringing a twinge of pain.
I can be a real girl and do what I'm told.
I can be a real boy if it means survival. But when I look in the mirror, I cannot tell if it is my reflection or someone else's.
Gender is a puppet show.
It's ventriloquism, whatever it takes to fool you, and there is no easy escape. Each time you call me he, boy,
She, girl,
I feel you tug the strings. Baggy costumes letting my body escape me.
But I am learning how to become.
How to fight through dysphoria and disobey.
To untangle this body from the girl I was woven into.
Unbuoy my joints from whittled blocks. I snapped the strings that have held me safe, but sorry.
They snap back and leave tally-mark bruises won for every time I let femininity be replaced by whatever it is I've escaped to.
Change isn't easy when instruction has become reflex, performance, a nervous habit, the kind that makes my bones stiff.
Not a body,
but a doll on a string. I swallowed the graceful hand of God so that I might breathe this body whole. This is my resurrection. This is magic. This is truth. This is the only way I know how to be. I wish my body didn't need a gender.
I wish I didn't have to be a real boy.
Or a real girl. I wish I didn't have to be real to be allowed to exist.
My body is still far from any kind of home.
It still hurts to breathe too deeply.
To be whole but not yet holy.
Home is a body where you get to be you. No strings attached. Have you ever felt that? Have you?
Gender is a stage.
And we are all fastened to it. Don't be surprised when we break free.
Welcome to the Southern Nevada Diversity Summit. Hosted by the Southern Nevada System of Higher Education Institutions. College of Southern Nevada, Desert Research Institute, Nevada State College, and University of Nevada, Las Vegas. Please pay attention to the following instructions for today's workshop. Today's workshop is being hosted via Microsoft Teams meetings. While attending today's meeting, you will have access to the Microsoft Teams toolbar located at the bottom of your screen. At this time, we ask all attendees to turn off their cameras and mute their microphones so that the presenters can be more easily seen and heard. In order to turn off your microphone and camera, please click the camera and microphone icons located on the left-hand side of the toolbar. You will know that these are no longer on when there is a slash going through them on your toolbar. During today's workshop, please use the meetings chat feature, which can be opened by clicking the word bubble icon on the right-hand side of your Microsoft toolbar. Please note that things written in the chat are permanent and can be seen by all attendees. You will also note 3 small dots in the center of your toolbar. This is the More Actions menu. Microsoft Teams now offers live captioning in meetings. To turn captions on, click the 3 small dots in the center of your toolbar that make up the More Actions menu. Then, click Turn on Live Captions. Captions will then appear in real time across your screen. Visit Microsoft Support for more information on live captions. Please note, all meetings are being recorded and the recording will begin now. A red dot next to the meeting clock on the toolbar indicates recording is in progress. All recordings will be available for playback on the 2020 Southern Nevada Diversity Summit website after October 7th. We need your feedback, so please remember to complete the post-summit evaluation, which will be sent to your email later today. Thank you for attending the 2020 Diversity Summit. Your workshop will now begin.
Esmeralda, you can start your presentation now. You're muted, Esme.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me now? Can you hear me, Ashley?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Okay, let's see. Let me do this one more time. All right. Hold on. Okay, perfect. Can you see my presentation, Ashley?
Yes.
Okay, excellent, great. Okay, so let's start. You are in academic advising from a social justice perspective to include DACA undocumented students. My name is Esmeralda Carretero Rodriguez, and my pronouns are she, her, ella. Thank you everyone for taking time of your morning on a Friday to be here today. I'm very excited to present to y'all a little bit about my experience, my work, and my research. I'd also like to thank Ashley Gonzalez, who will be moderating and assisting me with my presentation. I want to begin, just so you know, we're going to be using the chat box, and sometimes you will have the opportunity to also unmute yourselves, or Ashley actually will unmute you by you raising your virtual hand. So just raise your virtual hand. I'll have those instructions specifically on each slide. So I do want to begin with my own positionality, as I am currently an academic advisor at Nevada State College, but I do want to express that the views shared today are my own. I am originally from the Bay Area, California. I have a bachelor's in liberal studies with an emphasis in teaching and learning bilingual education. I have a master's in Mexican American studies as well. I am an immigrant and also a DACA recipient. I have been in this country for over 30 years. I consider myself a third generation immigrant because my grandparents arrived to this country as temporary workers under the Bracero program of the 1950s. Some of you may be familiar with that. Due to issues outside of my control, I am the only undocumented person in my immediate family. My mother is a permanent resident, my siblings are all US citizens, and my father is in Mexico. I mention this because in the spirit of Howardson, you can't be neutral when the train is moving. So in other words, my worldview is informed by my lived experiences and that of my undocumented community. As an undocumented person, I have suffered and struggled against oppressive practices, and through the interactions I've had with my students, I've been able to gain some knowledge on how to better serve them, and that's my goal today. While I understand that traditional qual and quantitative research has this assumption that you can control for bias via neutrality and objectivity, and therefore positionality, in my discipline, we don't believe that. The work that I do and the research that I embark in stems from ethnic studies, cultural studies, and from critical scholars that are informed by critical legal theory, critical studies, and critical race theory. We believe that it is important to make our positionality transparent and how our positionality influences the research. So now that I've established a little bit about myself, I wanted to talk about community norms or agreements. Some of you may have participated in our guest speakers, our keynote speakers presentation, and I want to be mindful that we may have different views or we may respectfully disagree, and that's totally fine. This is a space, this is a brave space. I say brave because it does take courage to be vulnerable and to just be open, right? And so I want to know from you in the chat box, please type in, you know, what do you need in order to learn today and share an experience. So for me, I seek mutual respect, and even respect can look different ways. So just being mindful again that we all come from a different lens, different experiences, and we just want to be mindful of that. And then also intentionality, right? You are here for a reason. There was something that draw you through this to this presentation. So just remember that intention of why you came here. You want to learn, explore, or possibly share. If there's anything that comes up, Ashley, feel free to share it with us. I know I can't see the participants or the chat box, but if you can please read off any responses that we receive, I can give you all a minute or two. It can be as simple as, you know what, I just need, you know, anything that comes to mind that you need to experience today. There's no right or wrong. It's just what feels good for you.
Some things are patience, open-mindedness.
Perfect, perfect, perfect. Yes, patience, key. We're always seeking that patience, yes. Anything else, Ashley?
Not at this moment.
Okay. Okay, no problem. So whether you choose to share your agreements with us today, if you think of something, you are more than welcome to type it in the chat box. If you can just be mindful of whatever is shared, I want everyone to feel included today. So that's why I share that. Anything else,
Some
Ashley?
responses.
Yeah.
Some said empathy,
Empathy.
kindness,
Kindness, yes.
and people being willing to be called in.
Okay, excellent, excellent. I love the called in aspect, right? We want to, there's this I think I heard it from the youth, right? Why are we having to feel like we're being called out? Let's call in, right? Let's feel welcomed. I appreciate that. Yes, I want this to be a place of empathy, of understanding, and kindness. We will be discussing, you know, some controversial stories, so that's why I want to make sure that everybody feels respected and that the intentions are always about learning and being open. Thank you so much. So I have an activity for you all today. Let's see, all right, so learning objectives, the fun stuff. So I want to define DACA in an equitable way as it is standing right now. In legal terms, social definitions, I want to address the implications and intersections of what it means to be an undocumented student, and also define ways in which advisors can utilize their role as an advocate to serve the needs of all students, to include DACA and undocumented students. While I know there's a lot of you that are not advisors, this will apply to everyone. It's just an approach that I like to take to my advising practice. So moving from that, I do have a little activity for all, some questions. I was super excited when I thought we could do this in person, so be patient with me. I tried to recreate this in a virtual world. So if you can use your virtual hand, raise it, and Ashley will unmute you. Think about this, reflect about it. When you think of a U.S. citizen, what characteristics do you see? Whether it's personality, whether it's job position, whether it's clothing, whether it is skin color, what comes to mind when you think of a U.S. citizen? There's no right or wrong answer here. This is just exploration. So if anyone wants to share openly, Ashley will unmute you. You just have to raise your virtual hand. Ashley, anyone? I think someone tried to
I
talk.
had
I'm not
someone
sure.
in the chat box say competence is something that they think of a U.S. citizen characteristic.
Okay, interesting. Okay, okay. Yeah, you're welcome to also, if you want to type it in, if that's more comfortable, totally fine. Whatever feels best for you. I'll give a few minutes.
I have a couple more responses. Someone said it's difficult. Someone else said someone with the opportunity to receive federal financial aid.
Someone that can
Privilege.
receive, privilege, okay.
And I saw a comment about somebody raising their hand, but I don't see anyone raising their hand.
If someone that is
You can
raising,
unmute yourself.
you can unmute yourself too. Yes, yes. If you want to just unmute yourself, give your name and where you're from, and then just share out, totally fine.
Someone said entitlement.
Okay, okay.
Someone who can vote.
Okay, I'm sorry, who was that?
This is Angie Freeman. I would say privilege is definitely a characteristic that sticks out. Just having a lot of benefits as being a U.S. citizen, you know, things that we don't even really think about, you know, as we're living our day-to-day lives.
Thank you, Angie. I appreciate it. Yes, awesome. I've had the honor of working with Angie, so I'm really happy you're here. Thank you. Yes, good point. Privilege, very relevant. And anyone else wants to share?
Hello. Hello, can you hear me? This is Vincent.
Yes, Vincent, yes. What do you
Well,
think?
thank you, Ronald. Yeah, thank you so much for putting it together. I'm really happy to see a lot of familiar faces. But when it comes to the question of citizenship, I think it comes in two different viewpoints for me because myself being a citizen and being around other people that are citizens, it becomes kind of like a standard of being what it means to be American. They're like, go out and vote, go out and be engaged, or use your social or apply for here. Like it's become like that's like the standard if you're around other people that are citizens. But then if you look at it for people that are not citizens, that are residents or undocumented or DACA, it becomes a sense of like privilege, because it's like a stature that maybe that they don't have and privileges that they don't carry. So when I think of citizenship, I think of different perspectives. Like if you talk to citizens and you're a group of just citizens, they see it one way. And then if you talk to different people of group that are not citizens, they see it a different way too. So it's like that dichotomy that exists with identity. But yeah.
Thank you, Vincent. Yes, yes. Very, very, very valuable. I appreciate the insight, and I have more questions, so we'll be able to engage even more. So I heard, privilege. I heard having access. I heard benefits. I heard just being able to not have to think about U.S. citizenship as a concept, as a daily thing, right? So I created this box because try to imagine everything that I just mentioned and that folks shared. Try to imagine that inside this box right now. Try to picture that that's what it is, the benefits, all the things, the privilege that comes with that. And so I want you to think, who creates what goes inside that box? If anyone wants to share that in the chat box or share out loud, you're welcome to do that. If not, totally fine. But I want you to reflect who creates what goes inside this box. Ashley, is there any responses in the chat box?
So somebody said society, media, everyone.
Okay. Okay, I like that. Society and media, right? We can even unpack that alone. Good question. Good answer. And so what upholds the box? I think you all said, everyone, the media, many things can uphold that box. And then ultimately, how do we individually take part in upholding that box, right? Whether it is the privilege, the benefits, everything that goes inside that box. So a follow-up question to that, that I hope folks can answer would be, who is left out of the box? If anyone wants to share out loud, you're welcome to unmute yourself, or if Ashley, if there's any responses in the chat box, I'm happy to hear that. I am not hearing anything. I don't know if anyone's muted. Ashley, is there any responses?
Not currently.
Not currently? Okay. So totally fine. Like I said, this is more of a reflective activity. I want us to really think about, for those of you that have that privilege of being a U.S. citizen, you're not constantly thinking of like what you can access. And we'll go more in depth about this, but I wanted to give this perspective just to, you know, in simple ways, just lay it out visually in a way that you can see, you know, who is left out. And oftentimes is undocumented folks. Those that are most marginalized are the ones that have no access to what goes inside that box. So I want to remind us that the people that don't belong inside that box is undocumented people, and we can all take part of that by reinforcing the power and privilege that we have or challenging that. All right, so from here, this is more of an internal activity. Take a few minutes to write somewhere, either a smart pad, your phone, just a reflection. You know, I want you to think about what does social justice mean to you? It's not, there's no right or wrong answer. It's just, I'm curious to know, you know, what does social justice mean to you? Have you ever engaged in social justice work? Is it something that just came to the forefront right now? You know, the perspective that I'm using today is stemming from social justice, which is a very critical approach, but it's also very real. And so I want us to really think about, like, what does that mean to you? Again, you don't have to share out. It's more of a personal reflection. If you want to write that down now, or just think about it as I continue on with my presentation. So the reason I bring this up is because I want to talk about the I word, which I will explicitly say I don't like that word. Some folks may not agree with me, but I want us to think about and reflect in the ways in which power and privilege operate in these spaces we work, within our own families, but mainly I'm thinking about our students, right? Because we are aware that there is power and privilege. We already defined the fact that having or being a U.S. citizen, there is a system in place that is upholding it and protecting it. And so I want us to think about, like, what would students potentially feel or experience when they are called an illegal alien? And is this a neutral term, right? Is it really neutral? And so if there are any responses, Ashley, or if anybody wants to share out loud, you're welcome to do that now. Is there anything in the chat box, Ashley?
Yes, I had someone said dehumanized, targeted.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes, yes, yes. And more questions for those of you that are thinking about this. Let's see. I want you to think about, like, what are the types of experiences? So dehumanization for sure. And Paula Ferret said, you know, it reminds us that through this process of oppression, both the oppressed and the oppressor actually become dehumanized. And so I want you to think about the types of experiences that members of our undocumented community, in this case, the oppressed group, may be having in such places of power and privilege, whose presence is in constant threat of erasure, whose safety is being sacrificed and minimized in the name of neutrality. We must question how this illusion of neutrality and objectivity manifests in spaces of power and privilege that are very real. And depending on where you are positioned, either inside or outside of that box that we just talked about, you will either reinforce or challenge the false belief of neutrality and objectivity. And so I want us to think about that, and then also consider the potential consequences of upholding that box. Ashley, is there any responses from the community?
Yes, I had someone who said they feel victimized and exposed. They feel like they do not belong here.
Very valid. Thank you. If anyone has their raised, like they want to speak, you're welcome to unmute yourself. Is there anyone raising their hand, Ashley, that you can see?
Not currently.
Not currently. Okay. If anyone wants to share, you're welcome to. I know it can be triggering. I want to be mindful. There may be folks here that they themselves are undocumented. So I just want us to reflect on this word. And the reason I say this is because, unfortunately, we may use the word undocumented in spaces where we feel, it's allowed, like in higher education or possibly in our classrooms. But the reality is that historically and currently, there is the media, there are political campaigns there that really still believe that we're not part of humanity. We are being dehumanized. And as you can see the sign at the very bottom from El Paso, this is from 1929. And I want us to really think about the rhetoric that it is spilled in these graphics right now, because all of it is about illegal aliens, is what they're calling us. And the comparisons that they have is dogs, Negroes, and it just completely strips away our humanity. And this has, even though this sign is from 1929, xenophobia has very real consequences. I know the shooting here in Las Vegas, the university was just yesterday, and also El Paso last month. And I just want to be, realistic. It's hard to accept it, to think that there's people out there that don't see us as humans, but that's the reality of it. And so I want to talk about diversity and inclusion. This is so solely informational. It's an excellent article. I will have a reference list at the very end of my presentation that you are all welcome to take a picture of. You can take a picture of these questions, but I just want you to, I call on all of you that work with our youth or have community members that are undocumented to consider, these questions, to really reflect on diversity and inclusion versus equity and social justice. And I think that in order to understand how power and privilege operates, we really need to unpack our own biases and assumptions by really reflecting on these questions. And so serving undocumented students must go beyond the degree planning process. And so for me in particular, I think about all the students that, come to my office, and they may be fully documented, their families may not. So I take into account the whole student, not just the degree planning process. That is my approach, and I think about these questions. And so DACA, I want to talk about DACA simply because there's been many updates recently. Two things that you can know about DACA, really all it is, it's just a work permit and work permit and deferment from deportation. And so it's only temporary. This is not a permanent relief, and it's not any type of citizenship path. And so that's just to clarify misconceptions. Some folks may think this is some type of pathway for citizenship, or that we get some type of permanency. It's all temporary. And to better understand this, I do have some stories, some characters. So I am seeking from the audience to participate either through the chat box, or if you want to elaborate more, you can unmute yourself. So this is Isabel's story. So Isabel is a first-year incoming freshman. She is majoring in elementary education, as her dream is to become a teacher. She is 17 years old. Does she qualify for DACA? You can just type yes or no in the chat box. I'm really interested to know what you all think. And there's a tip there for y'all. Ashley, do we have any responses?
Okay, so we just had a couple come in. We're getting a couple yeses to the question. The majority, actually all of them so far, have been yes.
Excellent. Well, actually, the answer is no.
Esme, you're muted.
Thank you. I'm sorry for that. So the answer is no. The reason is because no new applications have been accepted since the time that Trump ended DACA in 2017. So even though, let's just say Isabel was just a few days away from that 15th birthday, I want to go back to that tip that I gave you all. It says, right, that you must also be 15 years old by the time that you apply for DACA. So because Trump ended it in 2017, she was not 15 at that point. So she does not qualify for DACA. So for the most part, all our incoming students, high school students, are not going to have DACA. And so that answers the question. All right, so we're going to move on with Mark. So Mark is a DACA recipient and his family is all undocumented. Due to COVID-19, he is the only one able to work at this time. He received a scholarship that requires him to be enrolled in 12 credits. He needs to have a 2.5 minimum GPA. And I should have mentioned good academic standing. He's meeting with you and he shared that he's struggling to make ends meet. And he can't concentrate in class due to family obligations. He is already in academic probation from spring due to COVID-19, and he's afraid of losing his scholarship, and his DACA expires in 3 months. Can he apply for federal or state funding? Is there any responses? If anybody wants to unmute yourself, you can, or you can just write it in the chat box. I'm curious to know, can he apply for federal or state funds?
Currently, everyone is saying no.
Okay, perfect. And that is the answer. You can't. Even though you're a DACA recipient, you can't apply for federal state funds. Can he still renew his DACA?
Yes, we're getting answers that yes, he can renew his DACA.
Perfect. Thank you, Ashley. Does anyone want to guess how much that's going to be?
$600.
$600. Thank you, Angie. Yeah, I wish it was
500 and 650.
Okay. All right. Y'all are doing math. That's awesome. So currently, even though the Supreme Court said yes, DACA stands, the Trump administration has made some very significant changes. And so the other part of it is that renewals are now only 1 year. So while Mike will only need $495 to renew, he's going to quickly need to gather up the next $495, to renew, because USCIS recommends between 4 to 5 months. And even though he's 3 months away, he still can apply, and there is a chance that he will get it. But because USCIS is saying you need 4 to 5 months, that means there's a chance he may either the date is going to overlap, or he may be without DACA protection for a few weeks. And so I want you to think about that, right? So if it overlaps, that means it's going to be even more than $1,000, right? Because they don't care when your DACA ended. They're going to make your new start date when they decide to renew you. Additionally, if he submits it 3 months, and like I said, USCIS is saying 4 to 5 months, and they take those 5 months, it's going to disrupt his income. That means he's not going to be able to support his family, right? And his whole family right now is depending on him. Our driver's license here in Nevada are tied to our DACA. So that means that he'll be without a driver's license. That means no transportation. Health insurance, if he even happens to have health insurance through his job, which oftentimes folks don't have that. But if he happens to have health insurance, it's going to get disrupted. And additionally, the emotional and mental toll on any other adversity that this student may be experiencing, right? Because students in general struggle, right? Whether it is with the classwork or just balancing life and work, and then adding all this other layers. So, and this doesn't include the potential fees an attorney will charge to process the renewal, or if an organization does it, how much they may charge. And so I wanted to bring this perspective just to give you a very real situation that this is the case. And so going back to Isabel's example, so Isabel meets with you as a sophomore. Remember, she is fully undocumented. She has excelled in all her courses despite having to work full time to pay her education. She has not shared her status with anyone else due to fear. She is preparing for her praxis exam, which is a requirement in order to finish her degree and in order to become a teacher. But when trying to sign up for this praxis exam, she was asked to provide a social security number. She is asking you for help on how to go about this. What do you say? So I'm very eager to hear either from someone that can share a little bit out loud, or if you feel more comfortable in the chat box, Ashley, let me know.
I'm just giving them a couple seconds. I know it takes a second to type.
Yeah, no problem. I'm keeping track of time. We're good. Is someone raising their hand? I don't know if I see someone raising their hand.
We had a comment to say this is a hard one. Someone said I would reach out to my School of Education faculty friends.
Yes. Relying on our network, right? That's a big one. That's a huge support for sure. Anyone else?
They would see if they can accept a student ID as a form of.
Okay. A student ID. I'm curious to know if they meant like a student ID number. I'm guessing that's what they're saying. I don't know if they'll provide any clarification, but are they referring to a student ID number?
I made that comment. I was thinking like our student IDs like on campus that we give.
Oh, okay. And I know your voice sounds very, very low, but I captured it, that it's the student ID that you all give. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, excellent. Great. Thank you. I appreciate it. Okay, student ID number, yes.
Someone said contact the Nevada Department of Education for alternative routes or options.
Okay, yes. All right. These are all great answers. I just want to say I see the effort is being made. And I do want to share actually, because it's been a challenge for me trying to navigate this myself. But I also want to bring up the fact that not only will they need a social security number for the praxis exam, they will need it for a background check that is required for fingerprinting in order to be licensed. So if it's not the praxis, it's going to be the background check. And in the end, they won't be able to fully teach because they can't be hired without a social security number. So that is the reality of it. And I'm not going to say this is it and they can't do it. I'm just letting you know this is some of the real challenges that as an education advisor, I'm constantly having to face. And it's just to determine, right? Because we do want to pipeline more students from Nevada into the Nevada Clark County School District. I know that's a big goal of ours in the School of Ed. And just to mention this, the praxis exam is administered by a private company. So it's not a government entity. It is just the way the private company administers their exams. And so the reason they use the social security number is because they want to identify the person. So while you may be able to use your student ID, or you may be able to use any other type of identification, if you are able to work it out, it's not something that is accessible. It's not something that you can just look it up and be like, yeah, I can do it this way. This is something that you literally have to dig through, and that students don't even know how to navigate themselves. So it's a lot of work. I just wanted to bring some perspective. If there's any last thoughts on this, Ashley, you can share.
Somebody commented that the praxis actually allows you to leave it blank, but that you may need to update it at a later time.
Oh, okay. Yeah, well, that's good to know. That's good to know. And that's also ambiguous, right? We don't know. We have no certainty. Anyone else? I think I hear someone in the background.
Yeah, sorry, I was just gonna ask, is the praxis exam a professional examination?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So I read somewhere, well, because I did the research on the DACA and I read that there is a policy that the senator, one of the Nevada senator, had written to waive asking for social security number for any professional examination.
You mean a professional license? A
Yes.
professional license? Yeah, this is different. The praxis exam itself is it's like a standard. It's like a GRE almost. You want to think of it. And so when you do that exam, they require that because they want to identify you when they're sending your scores to the Nevada Department of Ed. So the only way they can identify you is through your social security number. There are ways around it, but I appreciate you bringing that to the forefront. Professional licenses are not denied to immigrants in Nevada. That is true. All right. Thank you so much, everyone. And I share this because both Isabel and Mark are inspired by my story and that of my students. So one of my dreams was to become a teacher. When I was 17, I met with an advisor at a private college that is now out of business. But that advisor told me, I'm sorry, sweetie, I can't help you. Come back when you have a green card, is what she told me. It was very, very difficult at that time, being 17, realizing that I would never, right at that point, I was like, I'll never be able to be a teacher. And so I'm not here to say, oh, I feel so sorry for myself. Look at me. It's possible. Sooner or later, if you find a way, we find a way. And I encourage you all, to think about that when you're speaking to your students. We're going to go back to the stories in a little bit, but I want to unpack undocumented. And I want to talk about this social security number. For those of you that do have a social security number, I want you to think about in what ways do you use that number and what does it give you access to? You can write it in the chat box or you can share out loud. I'll give you all a few minutes.
We have a couple. Some said real IDs, benefits, voting, federal aid.
Yes, federal aid, voting. Yes, I'm sorry, what was that?
Employment.
Employment, yes, work, correct. Opening a checking account, applying for a loan, buying a home. What was that?
State benefits.
State benefits.
Credit card access.
Credit cards, yes.
Buying power.
Yes, buying power, yes.
The ability to acquire wealth.
Yes, definitely. Ability to acquire wealth. Those are all very valid points. Anyone else wants to share out loud? If any of you want to unmute yourself and talk a little bit more, you're welcome to. Otherwise, is there any new ones, Ashley?
Someone said to apply for state assistance or federal assistance.
Right. It back right to my original perspective of power and privilege, right? Social security number gives you that power and that privilege to apply for every benefit that we just discussed. And whether we are aware of it or blind to it, it's there and it's invisible. And that's why it thrives, right? Because we don't think about these things. We just go and apply for our checking account. We just go and apply for the next job. We just go and buy the next car. These are things we don't think about because we have that power and that privilege in that social security number that is tied again to that US citizenship. And so whether we like it or not, it is operating and it's everywhere that in our society. And so now I have a true or false. Since undocumented people don't have a social security number, then they must not pay taxes. Just type in true or false. Ashley, let me know if as responses come in.
All the responses are saying false.
All right. Okay, I have a lot of woke people. That's awesome. Yeah, it's true. We still pay taxes. It's not talked about, right? Nobody mentions the ITIN number, and so the ITIN number, I bring it here because a lot of students may have, again, social security number, but their parents may not. And when they are applying for FAFSA, many of them are fearful of applying to FAFSA because they believe their parents don't file taxes. Always ask, do they have an ITIN number? Sometimes, it's just asking that question. Again, leave it to the student to share with you. Don't assume, but have this information ready and accessible so that you understand that this ITIN number can be used for tax purposes. And so we do pay taxes, not only when we purchase things, and like, for example, if you're shopping, we're paying taxes, but also we file taxes. To clarify, it does not give you any type of authorization to work. It doesn't provide any type of eligibility for Social Security benefits. So we'll debunk that myth. And then we don't even qualify for earned income credit. So I just want to make that clear because there's this assumption that undocumented people don't pay taxes and that we take benefits. And apparently we steal jobs too. So I don't know at this point what we do, but anyways, so the bottom line is immigration is complex. So it is important to not share your student status without their consent, whether they have DACA or not. They don't want you to share their story. If they don't explicitly share their story with you, don't assume. And if they do, then make sure to get their consent that you can share their story. Inform yourselves. Please stay away from giving legal advice. While the legal experts are definitely the go-tos, also leverage the knowledge of our community. So for example, if there is a person in your community or within your staff that was formerly undocumented and now is a legal permanent resident, or was formerly undocumented and now has DACA, you can leverage that knowledge. It's always important to remember the legal aspects, but also leveraging the knowledge of our community because they themselves are the experts too. Being mindful of your language, right? We just discussed about that rhetoric of using the I word. We talked about how power and privilege operates in these spaces. So help us debunk these myths. Help us by explicitly stating, no, this is not the case. They do pay taxes. This is what it is. Or, it's much more complicated than just applying for a social security number. Because right now there is no real path for us to apply for any type of legal relief without life-threatening consequences. And if you are interested, due to purposes of time and just I didn't want to deviate from this presentation, if you want to look up the Clinton's 1996 IRCA, that Immigration Act, it will bring to light why we're facing such challenges right now with immigration. I mean, immigration has always been complicated, but that law from 1996 really, really did us a lot of harm. So if you want to check that out or learn more about it on your own, you can. So just so you know, there's no path without any real life threatening consequences, which means having to go to jail because you were here illegally, or having to separate from your family for more than 20 years. That is my own reality. So there are very true consequences, and it's not an easy choice. So moving on from that, are all undocumented students the same? I want to bring intersectionality and give credit to critical race theories lawyer and legal scholar Kimberly Crenshaw, that says, when they enter, we all do. Intersectionality is very important. I want you to know that we are Black, we are Indigenous, we are Asian, and so much more. We're not just Mexicans, we're not just Hispanics. And why does this matter? Because of discrimination. It's not just because we're undocumented. There are folks within our community that have layers to their experiences. So our LGBTQ community, folks that are multi-generational, we've got to talk about health and ability, talking about education and work access, and also those mixed families, right, that may face different challenges. So we're not just Mexicans, we're not just undocumented. There is so much to our community even within, and being able to understand that the student that is sitting in front of you, it's not just an undocumented person. Consider the other ways that they may be facing discrimination as well. And so my approach to academic advising, when I say that I use social justice, it means that I use a critical approach. So there are so many resources out there, and having them all is great, but the key is to really understand which ones are actually applicable to your student and knowing how to deliver that information. You don't want to be like that advisor that I got that told me to go get a green card. So knowing how to deliver that information is key. And I'm happy to share with you all my framework. So there's always this tendency as humans in general to seek safety and just being right, right? We always want to be right. So I want you to see your students' intersections and draw from their community cultural wealth. Pay attention to the details that your student shares with you when they meet with you, when they have a chat with you outside of regular class hours. And try to understand where they're coming from. Never discourage a student. Yes, be realistic, but your attitude and your message delivery has so much to do with who you are and what you believe in, and it will show. I can't tell you how many students come to my office and tell me, hey, you know, I shared my story. I was so vulnerable with this professor or this person, and you know, I told them my situation, and then I asked them that question, which is that, you know, part of the stories we just talked about. And then they were like, well, I'm sorry, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to help you, you know, or go to this office and or dismiss them. And so, or potentially be hostile towards them. And so I want us to think about community cultural wealth. And in the chat box, feel free to share maybe some examples that, you know, what your students bring to the table for you. So for example, familial capital, linguistic capital, right? Many of our students are bilingual or multilingual, talking about aspirational and resistant capital, the fact that they are pursuing a degree despite their circumstances, and so much more. Is there anything in the chat box, Ashley, in regards to examples of community cultural wealth?
Not currently.
Okay, or if there's anyone that wants to share out loud, or you know, wants to talk about anything that I just mentioned, you're welcome to as well. I know it's a lot of information, so if you can think of anything, that's fine. But I welcome you all to look into Tarayoso's work. Like I said, I will have a reference list of articles that you all can learn more about community cultural wealth. Any comments, Ashley?
Not currently.
Okay.
Esmeralda, this is Chantel. Can you hear me?
Yes. Hi, Chantel.
Okay. Hi. Hi. I have a question. I don't know if we have time or if this is the space for like a discussion about this. I don't know Yoso's work, so forgive me for that. But I'm just wondering like what your thoughts are on the belief of, for example, thinking that undocumented or DACA students have this navigational capital or resistant capital, but that capital comes because they have to have it. Do you know what I mean? So like the only way for many of our students to be where they are right now is because they have a high level of resilience. And I guess my point is that sometimes I worry that we treat the students as if they are very resilient, personality wise, instead of realizing that the situation that they have been in has kind of forced that from them, and we don't always care for them in the same way that we care for students who we may think of as less resilient. Does that make sense? Like, I almost sometimes feel like we put a little bit more burden, and I'm going to call myself out on this, on the students that we think can handle it, and then we don't necessarily see like, well, what can we do for this student because they have had to be this resilient. And, you know, let me think more about what I can offer to them instead of like relying on them to be able to do it because they've done it for so long. Just, I don't know. That might be too deep of a question. I apologize.
No, I think you did. I think you gave it and you answered it, Chantal. And I am familiar with your work. And I gotta say, I really admire you, especially when you bring that psychology and social aspect to it, of like the different intersections of this, right? The community cultural wealth. And we can always be critical about these frameworks as well. But to answer that, I will say that from Tarayoso is more like debunking the myth that our students don't bring anything. So from that deficit perspective, so a lot of folks just see the students as like, oh, poor things, like they don't know how to do. So that's why they're asking me for help. And so that's why I wanted to mention like that they bring capital. It's not all of it. It might be a little bits and pieces from some or all, but not, this is kind of like debunking the myth that students come with a clean slate and they don't know anything. So it's about investing in that capital. And yes, how we invest in that or how we exploit that, right? You brought that point of like, yes, they bring that, but that doesn't give us a right to exploit that capital. So you bring a very real point, and it is true, right? Oftentimes we say, oh, well, there's this excellent student, and I think this is a great place to bring the good immigrant versus the bad immigrant, right? This narrative of like, well, this student, you know, has 5 degrees and straight A's and did this and did that and wonderful, and then this student is, well, you know, they decided to drop out of college and, you know, they can't do it, and that doesn't make them any less. That doesn't make them any less. So that, I think it's a very good segment to say, like, there's no good or bad immigrant. It's just about knowing and learning from the community and what they can bring and share with them, right? It's part of it's part of the repertoire. When I talk with my students, I try to understand where they're coming from and also make their life a little bit easier if I can. So the goal is not to exploit that capital. It is leveraging that capital and also making them feel safe, comfortable, and that they can be successful. That, I think those are very valid points. I don't know if I went too off.
No, I think that's wonderful. I see that Elizabeth has her hand up. So I just want to say, I think that really simple, like, recognize but don't exploit, I think is really important, because the students don't always see it in themselves, right? I'm constantly pointing out to students, like, you have done X, Y, Z, therefore you have these things already in your corner. But I think that's a really good way to approach it. Like, we recognize it, we may even highlight it for the students to see in themselves, but we don't exploit it and assume that that will be, you know, that they have enough and they can go do it on their own because they've done it for so long.
Yes, very real. Thank you, Chantal. I appreciate you bringing that insight. Very good point. And anyone else has anything to add to what Chantal or I just mentioned? I think it's very important that we have these conversations. I'm very excited.
We've had a couple people actually mention that we will never know the student's capital unless we ask them and we find a common ground and show genuine care and interest into the student. Somebody pointed out we don't know their talents outside of the classroom unless we ask or listen. And also ask, how can we add to their social capital network? Introduction to those within and outside of our institutions.
Yes, please. Yes, it's so important. Anything else, Ashley? I'm getting all excited about it.
Somebody did have a question. They said, are religious groups potentially part of community cultural wealth?
Yes, most definitely. I want to share that before I moved to Nevada, I was the coordinator for the AB 540 and Undocumented Student Center at UC Davis, which is I think it was the first national center that opened, dedicated to serve undocumented students. And a lot of centers in California have taken from that center. And so our biggest sponsor was our local church. They would regularly bring us food for our students. We actually had a space for our students to regularly hang out. And that's something, that's a dream of mine, you know, that every school just institutionalizes. I want to respect that a lot of folks in my community don't want to continue with the dream or dreamer center. I respect that. So I'll just say like a place where students can feel comfortable and safe. So at UC Davis, it's the AB 540 and Undocumented Student Center. And so in there, our church will bring food regularly. They would donate funds whenever they did fundraisers. They helped me put together the Undocu Grad, which was the first one ever at UC Davis. So church definitely is, religious groups are definitely included. They've done a lot of immense support in our within our community as well. Yes. Any other questions, thoughts, Ashley, on the chat box?
Hey Esmeralda, can I say something real quick? It's Lisbeth.
Yes.
Hi everyone.
Hi.
I to speak to Dr. Marshall's question real quick. I think that like somebody mentioned it in the chat box too. I think it's important to remember that like undocumented students, like they are more than just being undocumented, you know, and sometimes like finding out what it is that they need is literally as simple as asking them like, what do you need from me, like right now, you know, like how are you doing, like asking, not only asking how are you doing, but actually taking the time to listen to that answer, right? Like if you're asking, you know, like how are you doing, and then they start talking to you about their classes, like, well, my classes are going really well, you know, like I have a 4.0 right now. You just kind of redirecting and asking, no, like, you know, like how are you feeling today, you know, like what's going on. I know like for me, like myself as a DACA student, that's been really beneficial. I think that speaking from, you know, as being like a DACA student, like sometimes there's just so much pressure again to be this kind of like a good immigrant, right? Like like being well-rounded, having a job, being a full-time student. And sometimes like it's really easy to just forget about like myself, you know, and like partaking in like self-care, you know, whether that's literally just taking a day to rest or like engaging in like hobbies that I like outside of school. And so sometimes like it really is just as easy as asking, you know, like you know, like how are you doing, like, you know, like what's going on in your life, that kind of thing. I know that like for me, that's really helped. You know, I've had some wonderful advisors and friends on campus, Esmeralda being one of them. And, you know, anytime I see Esmeralda, it's always great because she asks, you know, like, how are you doing, and genuinely cares about her students and how they're doing outside of academics, you know. So sometimes it really is just as easy as just kind of like giving like a gentle reminder. But yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Liz. I'm gonna cry already. I appreciate it. That is the reason I do this work. I'm very, very grateful to have the opportunity to work with some amazing, incredible, resilient students. I feel very, very blessed. And I tell them, you know, you're literally the reason I wake up in the morning and come to work, because I know that I'm going to do and I'm going to contribute to your future in whatever way I can, just the way that a lot of folks did for me, because the reason I was able to be successful, it was a community effort from folks that knew me and folks that didn't, strangers that simply said, hey, have you ever thought about grad school? No. All right, well, let's talk about it, right? And so it's true. I appreciate, Liz, that you mentioned the fact that it takes more than the degree planning process. And I did mention that earlier. It's easy to say, you know what, these are the classes that you need, and then bye, right? But for me, it's like that human touch, and I do this for all my students, regardless. I always want to understand if they're too quiet, you know, or if they're like right now that we're in a pandemic, you know, I'm like, hey, I know about these resources. Would you happen to need them? You know, sometimes it takes you offering, because students don't know what they don't know, right? They don't know what to ask. And so you have to be the one that takes that ownership and that initiative of saying, hey, I know that we're in the middle of a pandemic, but there's free internet. Do you need that? There's a list of resources that I'm just going to send over in case you find them useful, and share them with your friends or your classmates. And just getting to know your students and also investing in their programs. So I take every opportunity to be involved with my student organizations by meeting with their student orgs, by participating in any way that I can. And students see my face and they recognize me, and they'll know again that I'm there to support them and there to learn with them. So thank you. Very, very good points, Chantel and Liz. I appreciate you all sharing. So what can you do moving forward? I think in the announcement previously, the goal was to have some type of like next steps activity. So I kind of reframed that and kind of laid out what are the current challenges that we're facing, and hoping that folks here, if you are interested, I am part of the NC All Access. I know a few members that are here with us today. I want to put it out there. Shout out to everybody that's part of the NC All Access. These are staff and faculty across the state that are just very giving and generous with their time, because we all have separate, very real roles and work that we got to do. But outside of that, we get together on a monthly basis, sometimes weekly, to gather up resources, to share our challenges, and to support each other. So I will have the website listed on the next slide. But these are some very real situations that we're facing. So currently, students that did not graduate from Nevada high school must pay out-of-state tuition, and so this includes grad students. And I know a lot of folks are moving in from like our neighboring California, myself included. And so what's going to happen with them if they want to pursue grad school, if they want to take part of our institutions? COVID-19 has displaced many families, and as I mentioned, the Social Security, that power and privilege that many of you have, we don't have. So housing is an issue. Rent is still being charged. Many of our community members don't have health insurance or rely in out-of-pocket costs that are just, there's people there that will take advantage. And so being aware of what health services are available that are free or at least at a low cost, please, feel free to share that with us as well. Financial aspects, right? Financial aid, we already talked about scholarships, state and federal funding. It's super limited. We rely often on private donors and scholarships and fundraising. We also have very limited income generation options. Many of our students have to do internships or get sponsorships. And again, those are limited. And oftentimes they expect students to be some type of superhuman. I want to acknowledge Liz's comment that life happens to all of us. And we undocumented people are not some type of superhuman and perfect human, that we don't make mistakes. And so, that's very real. So the social and social and emotional impacts that oftentimes may last a lifetime and are very real. So you can be an advocate. We need critical advisors. We need advisors that are willing to go beyond the degree planning process, that are willing to invest in our students' lives, and that are willing to challenge, right, these spaces that operate with power and privilege. I think we can all take our part. We don't have to do it alone, and we don't have to do it all at the same time. So this is my reference list. Part of the research that I do stems a lot from critical race theory, which some of you scholars may know that it was recently banned at the federal level. But that just also points out to the question as to why, right? Why is critical race theory being banned? But yeah, these are some of the resources. If you're interested in looking into Tarayoso's work, it's listed on there. You can take a picture. If you want to reach me, that is my email. And if you want to support our NC All Access, or if there are any grassroots organizations that are here today, I welcome you all to partner with us. I'm very interested in creating those partnerships, especially right now that we're in a pandemic. And I'm happy to take, let's see, how are we on time? We have 10 minutes. So it was a lot of information that I covered, and I was like, please don't run out of time. So I'm glad we made it. But so if there's any questions in the chat box, Ashley, you can read them out loud to me, or anyone that wants to say something out loud, you can raise your virtual hand and Ashley will unmute you.
Yeah, somebody had a question. They said, under the current administration, Are religious buildings still considered sanctuary?
Well, the sanctuary situation is a kind of like a state by state thing. So when I was in California, California became a sanctuary state. And while, yes, it should be respected, I believe churches and I believe even certain, I think, homes, people can go in there. Again, I just want to remind you all that while we may think that, yes, you can protect undocumented people in these spaces, it is very real that ICE, at the end of the day, does not respect policies. There has been many documentations and there's even research that brings to light the fact that ICE does not follow policies. So don't just rely, yes, offer those spaces, but be very careful because ICE does not respect us. They could care less. And if you're aware of what they just recently did to our women, the illegal removal of their uterus, that is happening at detention centers. If you're not aware of that, you can look that up online on your own. But I just want you to know how inhumane they treat us. They're not going to care if the place is sanctuary. If they want to get to someone, they will get to someone. Sometimes it takes community. There was some recording somewhere in social media where I saw a chain of humans protecting a family. There was literally a chain of humans between them and ICE. And ICE ultimately left. They had the people in a van and they were all using their bodies to protect them. So that is the type of activism that works sometimes. Sometimes, yeah, maybe the church will be a good place. I just want you to be very mindful that ICE doesn't care and that they will not follow the policies, at least not 100%. Hope that answers a little bit. Any other questions, Ashley?
Yes, there's a question. Are there any issues relating specifically to graduate students?
Oh yeah, there's plenty. When it comes to funding, again, we can apply for federal or state funding here in Nevada, but there are a lot of other scholarships outside of Nevada that may work out if it's through like private funding. Other things you can think about is if you as a grad student have to pay out of pocket for whatever reason, think about the impacts of having to work 2 to 3 jobs. Think about the impacts of having family. Think about just grad school itself is hard. So just think about that and add the other layer of not being able to have documentation. Whether you have DACA or you're undocumented, if you didn't graduate from a Nevada high school, you have to pay out of state tuition. So that already is a problem. So that is just the big issue. We need in-state tuition, and we need to, if the DREAM Act from California could be replicated in Nevada, that would be beautiful. All it is giving folks the opportunity to pay in-state tuition, and that would include graduate students. Any other questions, Ashley?
Actually, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. My name is Kamisha. I'm an advisor over at UNLV.
Okay.
My question is, a couple of the programs in our college, I would say is more difficult for some of our students to kind of navigate. So do you have any resources in terms of helping students navigate a career path? And then even for instance, like Isabella, the student you gave an example about, how would you help her navigate, what she wants to do with her career versus the obstacles she has in place?
Mm-hmm. And I want to ask, could you define when you say, I'll use Isabella as an example, but when you say that don't know how to navigate, what do you mean specifically?
I'm talking about like career path. So
you're saying like, how are they going to get a job? Is that it?
Right. And that's probably the biggest challenge I have is, students come to us for a lot. And a lot of it too is, what do I do with this degree when I'm done? And then it's, how do I help you to navigate getting something in your career field, even though I know there's many obstacles in your place?
Yeah, I appreciate that question. It's very challenging for sure. And we only have 5 minutes. So I will say, I do have currently specifically a few students that are fully undocumented and want to teach. And that was my situation. And so I create what I call a backup plan, a plan B. It is unfortunate that we can't pursue our very first, dream, but then you're going to have to work out a plan B. So what I do with my students is I let them know realistically, this is the expectations. You will have to go through a background check. Even finishing the degree itself is an issue because at Nevada State College, students have to apply for this program. The program itself requires that background check and the praxis. So they can't even get the degree itself because they don't have a social security number. While there may be ways around that or loopholes internally that are not talked, a whole different story. But again, we need something that is much more concise. Even if they were to be able to finish their degree, the fact that they don't have any type of work authorization, and I want to talk about like excluding DACA and TPS because TPS still brings a work permit, they can work. So if they have a work authorization, they can work. But if they don't, if they're fully undocumented, there's just no way around it. And that is why I'm here talking to you all. Like, this is why we need immigration reform. We need a comprehensive immigration reform that includes everyone here. And the only way to do this is obviously through voting. So I encourage everyone to vote. And then I've been protesting since I was in high school. This is back in 2006. And in 2001, the DREAM Act was that we've been trying to push the DREAM Act for over 20 years and they still don't budge. So this is a national issue. It's not just local, it's not just state. This is a national issue. This is why we need immigration reform. And so, like I mentioned earlier, it's complicated. I don't want you to discourage the students. I want you to find a plan B for them. So for my ed students that may not be able to, I let them know, hey, psychology, have you ever thought about that? Have you ever thought about another career that you may consider in the future? Because even though they can't legally work maybe right now, that doesn't mean that in the future they can't be sponsored via a family member or via a partner or via a job. Even legal immigration currently right now has been slashed. There's like almost no way to even apply legally. There's just so many things that have come from the federal administration currently that has pretty much made it almost impossible for anyone to apply for any type of relief without any real life consequences. So this is why we need a very solid, comprehensive immigration reform, something like the DREAM Act that we have been advocating and fighting for both inside and outside the institutions. And it just takes all of us, right, to bring this awareness of why we need it, regardless of where you stand politically. At the end of the day, folks are here, and giving them the opportunity to at least do things. I want to stay away from the right way, but I will use the right way for this purpose. We don't even get that chance. So don't discourage your students. Remind them that, their experience is valid, and then work out a backup plan that they can. Because right now in Nevada, you can get a professional license. So that means they can create their own business. I don't have it on here, but if you can look up Immigrants Rising, I believe we do have some resources that are on NCHI website that is listed on there. Check it out. At the very bottom, we have a bunch of resources and organizations that are looking at alternative ways of generating income. Immigrants Rising is a partnership. It's an organization in California, and they have a wealth amount of information on different ways they can do a sole proprietorship. They can do, for example, if someone does psychology, maybe they can create their own office and do their own business, or create a partnership with someone and be employed via your ITIN number. You can get an EIN number, which lets you have your own business. So for tax purposes and to get your license. So it's very complicated, and I don't want to get into it right now, but just know that there are alternative ways, and it is our role, those of us that do have the power and the privilege, to look for those resources, to do that research. And we do want to make this more institutionalized so it's smoother for everyone, right? Because we're all affected, advisors, career, financial aid, faculty. So it does take a village. And if we can create these resources and have them institutionalized so that we're not having to jump through hoops to just find out if someone can pursue a degree, hey, by all means. And I really do, like, I'm looking forward to that we can institutionalize things so that folks are just simply aware that it's not going to take us 5 different people to get one answer. But excellent question. Thank you. We've run out of time. And like I said, I encourage all of you to email me if you want to partner up or talk more about this. Thank you so much, everyone. I'm so grateful for your time and just for opening up your minds and just accepting me. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Esmeralda. I hope everyone can join us for the afternoon workshops. Thank you for joining us, and I will end the meeting now. Thank you.
Thank you.